Hello, welcome to class 13, unit 4. In this presentation, I'm going to be dealing with ing forms in English and the Spanish gerundio. Overview of this class. First, I'll start by referring to the main features of non-finite forms of the verb in English with a special focus on ing forms. Then I will make a note on some of the main functions of the ing forms according to Greenbaum and Quirk in a student's grammar of the English language. I will go on to speak about the Spanish gerundio, its subclassifications and main functions. Then I'll refer to usos anómalos del gerundio en español, and I will round off with some final considerations. Well, just a quick review on the main features of non-finite verbs. Non-finite verbs can never occur as the only verbal form in an independent clause. They generally occur in dependent clauses. They are not marked for tense, of course. They generally lack an explicit subject. They can be part of a finite verb phrase. And finally, ing forms, our main focus of attention today, can have nominal, adjectival, or adverbial function. A very quick revision of the non-finite forms in English, the infinitive, the ed or past participle, and the ing forms. The infinitive can have nominal and adjectival function, and also adverbial function. The ed or past participle form can also have adjectival, adverbial function, and even verbal function. By verbal function, I mean that they can be part of a finite verb phrase in perfect tenses or passive voice. He had written the letter when, so written would have verbal function in this case. But let's concentrate on the ing form, our main focus of attention today. The ing form in English can be a present participle, and as such, it can have adjectival function. For example, approaching in this anticipates approaching dangers, or the dangers approaching are various. So here we can see the ing form, the present participle, in attributive position, approaching dangers, or in postpositive position, the dangers approaching. It can also have adverbial function. While approaching, the train slowed down, meaning while it was approaching the station or whatever. And finally, it can also have verbal function, that is to say, it can be part of a finite verbal phrase. The train was approaching a bridge when it derailed. The gerund has nominal function in general. That is to say, it can perform all the functions a noun can perform. It can be the subject of a sentence, the subject complement, indirect object, direct object. Let's have a look at some examples. For example, approaching is an object of a preposition in this constitutes a different way of approaching new challenges. It can be the head of the subject in approaching her is not easy. Or finally, it can be the head of the direct object in I hate approaching her. I forgot the her there. Finally, it's important to remember that in English, the gerund can exceptionally be a pre-modifier of another noun. Let's see when. How can we tell if the ing form modifying a noun is a gerund or a present participle? Because we will see that they have the same surface structure. So how? By paraphrasing. If when we paraphrase, we do it by means of a relative clause, the ing form will be a present participle. In contrast, if we do it by means of a prepositional phrase, the ing form will be a gerund object of the preposition. For example, my best girls went off with a dancing show to New Phoenix. In that case, dancing is a gerund. Why? Because this could be paraphrased by means of they went to a show of dancing or even to a dance show. un show de baile en español. Or, we sat for a while at the courtyard of a complex called Buen Pastor to wait for the Dancing Waters show. The Dancing Waters show, dancing in that phrase is a present participle because this phrase could be paraphrased by means of the show of waters that danced, that were dancing, las aguas danzantes. So it's important to bear this in mind because it will have an impact in your translations. So as I said, the surface structure is the same, but the deep structure will change depending on how you paraphrase, you unpack these constructions. Well, we have provided you with 3 chapters, or we have recommended your reading of 3 chapters of A Student's Grammar of the English Language by Greenbaum and Quirk, chapters 15, 16, and 17, where in some of the sections they speak about functions of the ing form in English. In chapter 15, more precisely 15.10, the authors speak about the ing form as a gerund and having nominal function. Then they explain that it can syntactically function as subject, direct object, subject complement, appositive, and adjectival complementation. Well, you know very well, I don't think I need giving many more examples of all these cases, but probably I'll need to drop a word on adjectival complementation. The example they give, the authors give, is with busy, something similar to they are busy cleaning the house. And they say that cleaning the house is an ing form in nominal function, post-modifying this adjective. Well, why is this so? Because in this case, we can speak of a lesion of a preposition. They are busy in doing something, in cleaning the house. In that case, the ing form is an object of the preposition. The same happens with expressions with worth. This is worth answering. It's also considered in the same way. Now, if the ing nominal clause has a subject, it may be, this subject may be in the genitive or objective case. This is also interesting. So you can say something like, I approve of his being elected, or I approve of Joe's being elected. His or Joe's being elected is a clause, a nominal clause, object of the preposition. And as you can see in this case, it's in the genitive case, Joe's being elected. But it could also be in the objective case. I approve of him or of Joe being elected. Both are acceptable, the second one being more informal than the first one. Then in point 1534, they speak about absolute clauses. In this case, we are going to concentrate, as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, only on ing clauses, which have adverbial function and an overt subject. This is very important. And the overt subject is most of the times non-co-referential. That is to say, for example, no further discussion arising, the meeting ended. This is an example given by the authors. So we can see that the subordinate absolute clause, no further discussion arising, has adverbial function because it means because there was no further discussion or no further discussion arose, the meeting ended. The subject, the overt subject of the subordinate absolute clause is no further discussion arose, and the subject of the main clause is the meeting ended, non-co-referential subjects. The same goes for Christmas approaching, the children were excited, which could be paraphrased as Christmas was approaching, the children were excited. We can see that the subordinate absolute clause has an overt subject, which is non-co-referential with the subject of the main clause. Christmas in one case and the children in the other case. Bear this in mind to compare and contrast with absolute clauses in Spanish, because there's a slight difference as regards co-referential or non-co-referential subjects. Finally, in chapter 1535, the authors speak about supplementive clauses. However, we are not going to be using this label. We'll consider them simply as participial clauses with adverbial function again and with no subordinator again, but in which the logical relation has to be inferred from context. That is to say, something similar to what I have done before. Because there is no subordinator, like since, when, because, we have to infer it. However, in these cases, in this type of adverbial clauses, participial clauses, the subjects are co-referential. Being the best student, Sheila always helped her classmates. Since she was the best student, she always helped. So she was the best student and she helped. Trying drugs, one becomes an addict. By trying drugs, one becomes an addict. Because of trying drugs. If one tries drugs, one becomes. So the subject is co-referential. The subjects are co-referential. And finally, I met her traveling around Thailand. I met her when I was traveling around Thailand. Again, co-referential subjects. Then we move on to chapter 16. In section 1623, they speak about non-finite clauses as direct objects. Well, they give some examples, and I will concentrate on examples 3 and 5 because there's something important I want to point out. The authors speak about an ing participle clause in the case of they like talking about their work, and also in the case of I hate their or them gossiping about our colleagues. What is important is that in this case, we are not going to be considering talking about their work, which is a direct object, or I hate their gossiping about their colleagues, also a direct object, as participial clauses. We will be in line with the classifications taught in previous years, in first and in second, so we are going to classify them as gerunds because they have nominal functions. Then in 1629, the authors speak about complex transitive complementation by means of an ing participle clause. This time we are going to follow the authors and consider these ing forms as participle clauses. For example, with verbs of sensory perception, like see, hear, notice, feel. We could hear the rain falling. Hear is used here as a complex transitive verb, so the rain is the direct object, and falling is a participial clause that serves the function of complement of this verb. We could hear the rain falling. I noticed bugs moving around. I noticed, again, bugs is a direct object, and moving around would be a complement of this verb that is functioning here as a complex transitive verb. It completes the meaning of I noticed bugs. What do you exactly mean by that? They also speak about verbs of encounter, like find or discover. They discovered them stealing food. Them is a direct object, and stealing food is a participial clause complement of this complex transitive verb, and the same goes for my boss found me. Found me doing what? Found me sleeping. Sleeping is a participial clause in this case. Bear these examples in mind because there's something very similar in Spanish with verbos de percepción sensible. Okay. Finally, in chapter 17, 17.14 and 17.30, the authors speak about ing forms working as pre and post modifiers of a noun. This is the typical function. They give the example, a tile falling from a roof shattered into fragments, which could be paraphrased by means of a tile that fell from the roof. What is interesting is to see that the ing form, the non-finite form, is not marked for tense, but that you decide if it's that fell or that will fall or that is falling, depending on the tense in which the main verb is, shattered in this case. And in 1730, they make an interesting analysis of cases in which the ing form is functioning as a full adjective, is fully adjectival, like a boring movie, and they speak of the fact that in order to decide that the ing form is fully adjectival, they pay attention to whether the form as an adjective is gradable or non-gradable. For example, a boring movie, a very boring movie, this movie was as boring as this other one. Then they also speak about cases in which the participle indicates a more or less permanent characteristic, and this will depend on the function and position of the adjectival form. Let's say a reassuring man in attributive position conveys a meaning that is more permanent, a characteristic that is more permanent than reassuring in the answer was reassuring. So it's less permanent. The same goes for differences well, rather not the same goes, but they add that a difference is due to the type of head noun that collocates, are also due to the type of head noun that collocates or not with attributive or postpositive position. So smiling would collocate in attributive position with a smiling face more than with a smiling man. Okay, well, let's go to Spanish now and concentrate on las formas no personales del verbo, el gerundio. I will shift into Spanish now because all this is based on information taken from el manual de la RAE and our handout. El gerundio se acerca a los adverbios y por lo tanto tiene función adverbial. Eso es algo que hemos aprendido, que han aprendido desde el primer año. Sin embargo, y quizás esto es nuevo, no todas las funciones del gerundio son adverbiales. Y esto es muy importante. No todas las funciones del gerundio son adverbiales. Entonces, podemos hablar de gerundio perifrástico. No es adverbial, pues forma parte de las perífrasis verbales que funcionan de la misma manera que el verbo principal de una oración. Bueno, aparece o se usa con verbos como acabar, andar, continuar, empezar, estar, ir, llevar. Acá tenemos algunos ejemplos. Terminé admitiendo que estaba equivocada, te estoy mirando, vayan pasando, llevo viviendo aquí 2 años. Entonces, terminé admitiendo que estaba equivocada. El núcleo del predicado es terminé admitiendo. Es una unidad. Igual que te estoy mirando, el núcleo es te estoy mirando, el tiempo verbal lo da el verbo principal estar, en este caso en el presente del indicativo. Luego de esta presentación hay otra presentación más cortita donde, bueno, basada en el capítulo 13 de Ángela Di Tulio, perífrasis verbales y oraciones no flexionadas, que les recomiendo leer para tener bien claro cuándo clasificar a un verbo como parte de una perífrasis o no. Eso va a ser fundamental y va a ser evaluado. Otra de las funciones del gerundio, que no es adverbial, es el gerundio predicativo, como complemento predicativo. Las construcciones de gerundio pueden actuar como complementos predicativos. Los gerundios predicativos describen la situación o el estado en que se encuentran las entidades cuando realizan las acciones. Y aquí vamos a hacer la diferencia con el gerundio adjunto o que ustedes suelen llamar circunstancial de manera y que por lo general o tradicionalmente o habitualmente se enseña como que el gerundio siempre es un circunstancial de manera o un adjunto y no es así, entonces es importante ver la diferencia. Entonces, como dice aquí, Los gerundios predicativos describen la situación o el estado en que se encuentran las entidades cuando realizan las acciones, mientras que los adjuntos expresan estrictamente la manera en que se llevan a cabo las acciones. Es muy parecida, es sutil la diferencia, pero no es lo mismo. Por ejemplo, te vi pidiendo en el subte. Te vi, yo te vi pidiendo en el subte. Te es objeto directo. Entonces, pidiendo complementa el significado de te y por eso es un predicativo objetivo no obligatorio, porque podría ser te vi en el subte, pero modifica el objeto directo, no al sujeto. En cambio, escribió la carta llorando de emoción, es un predicativo subjetivo también no obligatorio, porque podríamos decir ella escribió la carta, y es subjetivo porque llorando se refiere al sujeto, ella, y no al objeto. Bueno, aquí es importante ver por qué escribió la carta llorando de emoción no es un adjunto o circunstancial de manera. Comparemos con escribió la carta usando tinta negra. Escribió la carta usando tinta negra es claramente un circunstancial o adjunto de manera porque expresa la manera, valga la redundancia, en cómo realizó la acción usando tinta negra. En cambio, llorar no es la manera en cómo escribió la carta, sino es el estado en que se encontraba la entidad, el sujeto, cuando escribió la carta. Veamos otros ejemplos de circunstancial adjunto. Por ejemplo, huyó arrastrándose. Huyó arrastrándose es la manera en que se escapó. Si no se arrastraba, lo iban a ver. No podía ir corriendo. O fuimos caminando por la montaña. ¿Cómo fueron por la montaña? ¿De qué manera? Caminando. No es el estado de la situación en que se encontraban. Vamos a ver luego ejemplos y muchos ejercicios para aclarar esto. Y finalmente está lo que se llama gerundio externo o periférico, que en realidad equivale a las construcciones absolutas. Por ejemplo, el ministerio, viendo los resultados, decretó la nulidad de las pruebas. Aquí tenemos sujeto correferencial. Como el ministerio vio los resultados, declaró las pruebas nulas. Es el mismo sujeto. Pero si yo digo, pidiéndomelo Juana, le prestaré el libro, el sujeto es no correferencial, porque en la subordinada el sujeto de pidiéndomelo es Juana y el de le prestaré el libro es yo. En español no es tan difícil identificar cuál es el sujeto, pero en inglés causa un poco más de dificultad y hay peligro de producir lo que se llama a dangling modifier because of the fact that we don't have as many verbal inflections to recover the identity of the subject as in Spanish. Eso lo tienen que tener en cuenta. Bien, veamos un poquito más algo acerca de las construcciones absolutas en español. Como dije, en esta presentación nos vamos a concentrar en el gerundio, pero se pueden construir con otras formas no verbales. Entonces, constituyen un binomio predicativo desprovisto de una forma verbal flexionada, o sea, el verbo no es flexionado, no está conjugado, desligado sintáctica y melódicamente de la oración principal, la entonación, y que aporta una modificación equiparable a la de una subordinada adverbial. Nuevamente tienen la función de una subordinada adverbial. Pueden construirse con predicados de distinto tipo, o sea, con formas no conjugadas de distinto tipo. El dicho, muerto el perro, se acabó la rabia, vemos que es una construcción de participio, muerto el perro. Acá vemos que está desligado sintáctica y melódicamente por la entonación. Muerto el perro, se acabó la rabia. Bueno, también pueden ser adjetivos. Enfermo el capitán, o sea, sin verbo. Tomó el mando un oficial. Lejos los buques, la población isleña pudo regresar a sus casas. Ahí hay un adverbio. Y también, por supuesto, el gerundio. Abriendo yo la puerta, se produjo el apagón. ¿Sí? Abriendo la puerta, se produjo el apagón. Podría ser ambiguo. Por eso es necesario retener el sujeto. Entonces, las construcciones absolutas poseen un sujeto explícito, que es correferente o no con el sintagma nominal de la oración principal. Acá hay una diferencia con inglés. En inglés, in the case of absolute constructions, the subjects are always non-correferential. In Spanish, they can be correferential or not. Abriendo yo la puerta, se produjo el apagón, no correferente. sabiendo que era culpable, decidió entregarse. Correferente. O sea, él o ella sabía que era culpable, él o ella decidió entregarse. Con los niños gritando no pudimos hablar. Acá es no correferente porque el sujeto de la subordinada absoluta es los niños. Los niños gritaban y nosotros no pudimos hablar. También es importante recordar que aportan modificaciones temporales, pero también de otros valores adverbiales. O sea, en abriendo la puerta se produjo el apagón, mientras yo abría la puerta se produjo el apagón de tiempo. Pero sabiendo que era culpable, decidió entregarse, hay otro tipo de relación. No hay una conjunción subordinante, pero asumimos que es de razón, porque sabía que era culpable, decidió entregarse. Veamos aquí. Estando yo presente, no cometerán esa tontería. Es un condicional. Si yo estoy presente, no cometerán esa tontería. Sabiendo que era culpable, bueno, yo lo analicé recién, y corriendo por la calle encontró una billetera. Mientras corría por la calle, encontró una billetera. Son el tipo de relación adverbial más típica. Bien, hay que tener cuidado porque estos son los usos correctos del gerundio, pero muchas veces hay usos anómalos o incorrectos del gerundio. Muchos de ellos son por influencia precisamente del inglés. Bueno, primero veamos, recordemos que el gerundio en general tiene nada más que función adverbial, excepto, vimos recién que puede ser parte de la perífrasis o ser un predicativo, pero en general decimos que tiene función adverbial y nunca adjetiva. Sin embargo, ustedes ya saben de años anteriores que ardiendo e hirviendo son excepciones. Vos podés decir el agua está hirviendo, ahí es parte de una perífrasis de gerundio, pero tráeme agua hirviendo, ahí esto se haga como un adjetivo. Bueno, el gerundio correcto debe significar simultaneidad o anterioridad, pero no posterioridad. ¿Cuál puede ser la excepción? Que esa acción posterior sea inmediata a la del verbo de la oración. Un ejemplo típico es salió dando un portazo. Es casi simultáneo. Bueno, otro uso anómalo, erróneo del gerundio. El gerundio adjetivado o especificativo. También se llama gerundio anglicado porque es un calco sintáctico del the use of the present participle in adjectival function in English. Los profesores mandaron un correo electrónico comunicando que no habrá clases. That's a mistake. You should say, los profesores mandaron un correo electrónico que comunicaba que no habrá clases o que no habría clases. In English, you would say the teachers sent an email communicating, and that would be a present participle post-modifying correo electrónico, but that is not the case in Spanish. También está el gerundio de posterioridad, como uso anómalo, lo que hablé recién. El presidente convenció a los diputados con su discurso, aprobándose al día siguiente la ley, no, y al día siguiente se aprobó la ley, o vivieron en Bogotá hasta el 2010, mudándose después a Buenos Aires, no, y después se mudaron a Buenos Aires. Bueno, quiero recordar, y lo tienen en las notas, que hay casos en que el gerundio puede ser usado como adjetivo, por ejemplo, en los casos del gerundio epigráfico, cuando hay una foto en un diario y abajo dice el presidente inaugurando la rural, por ejemplo. Bien, in our handout on page 195, uploaded in our virtual classroom, you have this chart where you have a graphic where you can see how to classify el gerundio en español. There's a broad division into interno y externo o periférico. El externo o periférico es solamente el gerundio en construcciones absolutas. Y luego, we have in the case of el interno, the three types, el perifrástico, el predicativo y el adjunto circunstancial. Okay, some final considerations. Why is it that we should compare, or we think it's worth it comparing and contrasting these non-finite forms? Because the ing suffix in English is added to infinitive forms, and it is considered as equivalent, between inverted commas, in form to the suffixes ando and yendo in Spanish. Ando is added to the verbs of primera conjugación and yendo to the verbs of segunda conjugación. Well, we should bear in mind that non-finite forms with this morphology ending in ing in English can be gerunds or present participles, therefore they can have nominal, adverbial, adjectival, verbal function, while in Spanish, the non-finite forms with this morphology, ending in ando, yendo, can only be gerundios, con función adverbial o el predicativo o todas las funciones que vimos. ING forms translate into Spanish as either gerundios, nouns, participial adjectives, relative clauses, while ando and yendo forms translate into English as present participles in verbal function or adverbial function, and never as nouns. Well, finally, we believe that it is the ING form can be a source of trouble when translating. I mean, the form, the surface form, the morphology of an ING form, or the morphology rather of a gerund or a present participle is exactly the same. So you should resource or you should pay attention to the syntax, meaning, and context to decide on the translation. So, for example, let's take this case taken from the UN webpage. The UN estimates that the world would need to increase its efforts to contain climate change and avoid escalating climate damage already taking place around the world. How would you translate escalating? Well, I would like you to think about it, provide translations, and we'll discuss it on Friday in class. Thank you very much.